Hi, everybody. You're back at the Faculty Factory, and I'm Kim Skorupski here at Hopkins, looking at our guest today, Dr. Ludy Shih. Hi, Ludy.
Hi, Kim. How are you?
Well, Dr. Shih is back to the Faculty Factory podcast because you may have heard her late last year, episode number 269, where she talked about something really new to the podcast, her transition from academia to industry and back to academia. She had a great story about leaving academia to go to, gosh, it was Biogen, Vertex, back to Boston U, done a lot of really interesting work. And during that episode, she mentioned some of the lessons she learned in industry. And one of those happened to be how to run great meetings. Well, thanks to our listener, one of our own faculty, our dear Dr. Michael Wilsley down at Old Children's Hospital, shout out to St. Petersburg, Florida, Hopkins down there, said, "Hey, I love Dr. Shih's podcast. She mentioned something about how to run effective meetings. That would be so valuable. How can I get in touch with her?" And so, of course, I gave him Dr. Shih's email address, and Ludy was so kind to share a slide deck and a site where her presentation, she gives these talks all the time because she has worked in these highly complex matrixed organizations. And so she's been invited to give this talk lots of times. She was so generous. And I said, "Hey, wait a minute. I'm on this email chain. Ludy, we got to get you back and record another episode on how to run great meetings." So thanks again, Dr. Ludy Shih. She has all the alphabet soup initials after her name, the MD, MMSc, FAAN, FANA, and probably a few more after that. She's an associate professor of neurology. She's at Parkinson's Disease and Movement Disorders Center, Department of Neurology, Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center at Harvard Medical School. Do I have that right?
Yes, I'll accept. Now that I've made the transition to Harvard Medical School, my appointment is pending. So, not officially associate professor, but hopefully will be soon.
Wow, that's a slam dunk. Come on, Harvard, get on it. All right, so let's go, Ludy. So take us away. How do we run a great meeting? We all hate meetings. I shouldn't say that. I'm projecting. I hate meetings, and all my friends and colleagues here at Hopkins, it's almost kind of, I'm embarrassed because they're like, "Kim, we know you don't like meetings, but well, Kim doesn't like to meet. So, well, Kim," and I'm like, "Wait a minute, am I a bad guy in this situation?" Because I feel like my brain automatically goes when I see the Brady Bunch squares. I pretend people make like $20 an hour. And then I count all the squares and I multiply that by 20 and then I multiply that by, an hour. And it's like, that's how much money, or 2 hours, however, multiplying by one is not hard. I can even handle that one. But I look and I'm thinking, we're so much money, and all we're doing is going through the list of, "I'm still working on 1, 2, and 3. Yep, I'm on A, B, and C, doing X, Y, Z." I'm like, why couldn't we have just sent an email saying same, same, or I need, rather than let's meet to make a decision or to dream or to team build or to brainstorm. I mean, that to me is a useful meeting, but these kind of meetings where you just kind of litany of, "All right, I'm up next," that drives me nuts. And I just feel like when I'm in a meeting, I'm not working. So, all right, I'm going to shut up. Dr. Shih, drop some wisdom
Oh,
on us. Thanks.
well, thank you, Kim, for having me back. And I totally agree. I don't know that we all have the right solution, but there's at least a way to potentially provide feedback to make meetings. And I've titled my talk "How to Make Meetings Work for You," and there's a sort of a hidden message in there too for you. And everyone's a little bit different, and so we'll all have to accept that when we're in a group, we all have different styles. But there's some possibilities when you're attuned to the fact that there are different ways that you could actually shape the meetings to work better for the team in your department, your group, or even for you. So as you mentioned, yeah, I learned this during my time in industry. And that's meetings are the bane of corporate life too. And so they're no less tolerant of poor meetings. In fact, they're more intolerant of poor meetings because they waste even more time and money. And so it's worth noticing, though, that clinicians, scientists, administrators, and academic medicine are no less busy. And I think meetings could be made more useful, and I think they can help us get stuff done.
Yeah.
So what do people say? Exactly what you said. In addition, on top of that, people will say, one or two people dominate the conversation and no one does anything about it. Or The organizer just doesn't lead meetings effectively. Or, like you said, most of the meetings are just passing on info, could have been an email. We don't even talk about the real issues. Or, gosh, no one is paying attention because they're on their phones or their
Mm,
laptops, right?
mm.
And then, corollary to, having the same conversations over and over, nothing gets done. And really common feedback that we get. So I think of this as three big challenges. Number one is this even a meeting?
Mm.
Number two is there's some skill, and we need to prioritize equity and balancing participant engagement. There are different ways to do that if you think about maybe where people are at in terms of their styles of working. And then number three is the follow-up, the after the meeting, both immediately and then shortly, a little bit time later, we'll introduce something called plus delta. So
Mm.
I think these three challenges line up to the before, the during the meeting, and after the meeting. And I think that can go a long way to making them really a lot more useful. So the first topic, before the meeting. And I'm borrowing some ideas from Harvard Business Review, which is, I think, still a good value for the money, 9, $10 a month. And sometimes you get some useful cheat sheets and topics that are relevant to working people everywhere. And then before the meeting infographic, which I have in my slide here, is should I hold a meeting? And the number one box, the first step is, have I thought through this situation? Because if you're holding a meeting and gathering 10, 15, who knows how many people together just to sit there so you can think, so they can watch you think, that's
Ooh,
not a good use of their time.
no.
So you need to schedule time for, especially if you're the meeting organizer, you need to schedule time for your strategic thinking.
Mm.
And then on top of that, maybe you'll say, well, I need a meeting because I need some outside input. All right, well, does that input come in the form of just a real-time conversation with that person? Okay, then is it something that requires a face-to-face meeting? Okay, all right, then if so, let's schedule and prepare the meeting. But the answer to the question is, does it need a real-time conversation? No, the answer is send an email.
Mm.
Or is this really face to face, or, can it be done by video conference? And, I think there's something to be said for video conferences versus face to face meetings. So I think that all the things that you go through as you think about good use of your time, but also good use of other people's time, you can save 10 people's
Mhm.
10 people hours if you simply create emails and get information that you need to move something forward so that the time spent in a group meeting is useful.
Yes.
So I think that bears keeping in mind. What about an agenda? I see so many meetings still in
Mm.
academia without an agenda. I'm kind of amazed. Are you the organizer? Well, if you are, then you should think about having an agenda. There's a couple reasons why. One is to signal, if I get a meeting invite and I don't get an agenda, maybe it's the kind of meeting where it's just very informal and we just want to get together and brainstorm. Fine. Then that's what the meeting should say. You don't want an agenda. You don't want to inhibit ideas. You want people to free flow think during the meeting. Okay, that's reasonable. But if you're having a meeting and you don't even say what the purpose of the meeting is, how do I know that I'm even needed there?
Right.
I work with people who are extremely busy. They'll just reject the meeting. They'll say, sorry, can't, they'll decline the meeting.
Right.
Um, and then, really say what front, what is your objective? What are you hoping to accomplish? If you're not sure, that's fine. There's all levels of really very concrete things you want to accomplish versus open-ended conversations. But creating the agenda allows for a few things. You get to have input from team members, and what I like to do, depending on the type of meeting it is, let's say it's a monthly recurring meeting where we're really trying to move, for example, running a interdisciplinary surgical care team, and we're talking about patients or issues that have come up because there's multidisciplinary, team members involved from different departments. You can use the agenda to even get a little input from the team members ahead of time. And so what I would sometimes do is say, here's a tentative agenda, kindly look it over. Have I missed anything? Are there other items to add? And
Mhm.
make sure to try to select topics that affect the entire team. If it's like just the one person, you could probably take that conversation offline. And then as you list the agenda topics, you'll get a sense, people will get a sense of, oh, okay, well, I can input on that. Or like, oh, these look like things I don't need to be here for. They can politely say, sorry, I have something I need to do. It doesn't look like you're, talking about anything, but if you need me, please reach out to me. It gives them the opportunity to say a couple days before your meeting, this is not something I need to be at and I have to be somewhere else. You could even go a little bit further and say for each of your items, is the purpose just to share the info? Is the purpose to seek input? Is the purpose to make a decision? And then that way people know ahead of time and they come prepared. How many times do people come into meetings and nothing gets decided because they just learned for the first time that you wanted information on this?
Exactly. That is one of on the receiver's end. I like an agenda only because the way, as you pointed out so nicely, Ludy, making meetings work for you. For me, as a recipient, I want to be prepared.
Yep.
I'm an uber organized, always prepared, always ready. So I like to, because I'm all about efficiency. So if I'm coming to a meeting, I want to have my data, my information. I want to have read the materials
Yep.
and be ready to move.
Yep.
And so that's why when I organize meetings, I'm the same way. I want people to be informed so that they are never blindsided. They can prepare. So that's why I think agendas are helpful as the leader and as the, participant.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I completely agree. And not everyone maybe shares that. And we'll talk about what kinds of people might be in that category and what kinds of people are not. And there are different types. But more to your point too, I think if you're the organizer of the meeting, there will also be topics that you don't necessarily own. But your job is to reach out to the person who owns that topic and say, look, it probably has to be discussed. Is that person ready to discuss it? If they're not, shouldn't be on the agenda. Push it off to another time when that person is ready, has done the work to bring that topic forward. And the last thing I would say is, oh boy, budgeting time realistically. If you have an agenda that has like 10 topics and you want decisions on all of them and it's an hour-long meeting, forget it. The other thing is in the days, I think we're more hybrid now. There are more people in person now, but when it was back-to-back Zoom meetings, scheduling a meeting from 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock was hectic because you need a little break before your 11 o'clock Zoom meeting starts. So I like 45 minutes or 50-minute meetings. You can even do that on your calendar. One word about calendars. I think digital calendars are life-saving. I can't survive my day without one. So if you have sent a meeting or you want a meeting, you probably should use your Outlook or whatever your institution uses. Microsoft Outlook is great for that. You should figure out if it's going to be Zoom, how to put the Zoom link in the calendar invitation, not in a separate email that someone has to go searching for later on. And if you have pre-reads or agenda topics, they can always be added to the calendar invite. So once they click on that event for the day, the Zoom link is there, the agenda is there.
Mm-hmm.
It's all set to go.
Yeah. Once I took the time to figure that out of how to post hoc after a meeting invite's been sent to put, I'm like, well, I can't put the thing in there now. Well, yeah, you can. You just open up the invitation, look at the paper clippy thing and put a thing there and it updates and sends that update. But I'm still always shocked, Ludy, when someone will say, hey, can we meet? And we figure out the date and time. They go, okay, well, save that in your calendar. And I'm like, no, you want to meet with me. This email is not, I'm going to now go to my calendar, make a note of it. And then you're going to later on going to send me something. So it's always, I say, send me an invite. And then the person actually sent me an email. Okay, here's your invitation. Please come to the meeting on da, 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 da. I'm like, no, the emails, this is still not the invitation to the meeting. What is happening? But yeah, that's so, I don't understand how anybody organizes a life without a calendar or figuring out how to do the invitation in the Zoom with the attachments. I send meeting invites to myself to do things, even as I use my Outlook calendar as a reminder of my to-do lists. Or I send people Outlook invitations to say, hey, Dr. Shih, don't forget to, that deadline for that paper is in 2 weeks. Kim wants the approval for something in 2 weeks. It's an invitation. And people email me back, hey, I just got an invitation from you. Is that a meeting? And I'm like, no, it's just a tickler. That's why it says tickler, reminder. paper due in 2 weeks. And that way you accept it and it gets plunked into your calendar. So now it's like an automatic reminder for you. I said, I'm just doing you a favor. I'm putting a tickler in there so that you don't have to all of a sudden wake up one morning and go, oh my gosh, that's this
Yep.
morning.
Yep. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think, by the way, I agree with all those comments totally. It's almost courteous to really offer to send someone an email invitation, which is an actual file. We're not talking about an invitation with calligraphy and sent in the mail with postage, but an actual computer file that helps you organize your day. And, by the way, as you said that, I was thinking, gosh, I wish journals would send out little calendar invites. Your review is due this day. That would help a lot, by the way. But you're right, digital calendars are a good way to time box and manage your time. So having an invite helps. So I'm just going to read off like an agenda for a recent deep brain stimulation, which is a surgical procedure, interdisciplinary team meeting agenda. And the number one item was their dashboard, queue of patients. I listed the person's name in parentheses. I put dash 5 minutes. We're just going to brief overview. Item number 2, case discussions. And I put myself in parentheses. I put around how much time I think that will take. 15 minutes, because I'm only going to discuss one patient. Number 3, neuropsychological updates. And that's because we have a neuropsychologist. And I put her name in the parentheses and I gave her 10 minutes for the thing that she wanted to tell people. So this is an example of a very casual one. Some people say, ooh, that sounds so formal. I don't want to like be all corporate. There's like this, mentality that in academic medicine, we want to, we want to eschew the corporate mentality. So fine, do whatever you think fits the culture of your environment. And what I've done here is a very simple one, just to say, hey, we're expecting you to come. That's all. And we're expecting you to talk about this, or this is your opportunity. You asked us could you update the group? Well, here's your chance. And so make sure, could you please make it? So I send this, depending on your institution, like I was sending this 2 days before the meeting and in the email, but also I would have slides for the case discussion. I would send a hyperlink to those slides in the SharePoint or OneDrive or shared folder, whatever you guys use, so that people could even click on it a couple of days in advance and go, oh, I forgot there's another patient I want Ludy to discuss, because they notice that there's only the one patient there, then that's their opportunity. That requires a little bit of interaction, and I know people feel like, oh, why am I spending more time on this meeting before the meeting? But that way you're not wasting an opportunity.
It's preparation. I think it's so important for the organizer. In a way, I'm the same way. Like I look in a month in advance. I've got a couple advisory board meetings coming up that I run in June, and I need to start planning that now. So I have the tickler in my calendar now.
Yeah.
Advisory board meetings coming up, because I also put the agenda together and then run it by my boss, a couple of the working group leaders, to make sure that they have the platform that they need, the amount of time they need, what they need in addition or in preparation for what they want me to do or other people to do to move things along. So it's a pain in the neck sometimes, but it's pays off. It's one of those things, so many things in the life where you're thinking, oh, I have a new hire. It's going to take so much time to train him or her. I'll do that later. No, if you invest the time now in training that person and preparing that agenda, it's a lift, but it really pays off on the back end of things because of it makes things so much more organized, more efficient, things run smoothly. And then again, as a recipient of these things, I know I like to be, for me, prepared, and I want to be a good team player. So I don't want to say, oh, I'll follow up later, I'll send something later, or I'll let you know, or while I'm at the meeting now, someone's asked a question, I'm not prepared. So I'm looking through my files, I'm not paying attention, I'm distracted. That to me, it's a poor use of time and adds to frustration. So I think that agenda and doing it ahead of time thoughtfully just gets everybody in that mindset so that when you're at the meeting, we're rocking and rolling. We're ready.
Right, exactly. That's kind of meeting prep. And so I typically at this stage say, okay, well, what about during the meeting? I have my little cartoon here. It's Bizarro Comics. It's a guy on a horse in his stall on a farm. And, normally you'd see pigs and sheep and cows there. No, it's all cats. And the guy on the outside, his neighbor, comes by and says, it's tedious, but it's the best way to learn. If you can herd cats, you can herd anything.
You can herd cats, you can herd it. Yes, yes, that should be the measure of leader. That would be a good executive or any kind of a leader behavioral interviewing exercise. Bring someone in for the interview and just say, now we're going to flood this room with about 12 different people and just sit back and watch them organize all that chaos. That's true. That would be like, whoa, this person is magician. You're hired.
So, at this point, it could be useful to think about personality in this way. And personality is a loaded term, and there's a lot of really interesting research on personality. A lot of people like Myers-Briggs. It's, used a lot. I think people are generally familiar with it. So I'll use that framework here, even though we know there's other, like the Big Five and the Hexaco personality tests that have a lot of actual, peer-reviewed published data and literature on them to support some ideas there. But for the purposes of this, I think it can be useful to think about the Myers-Briggs. And I'll get to that in a second. I'm talking about introversion and extroversion. But there was a survey, and this was published in HBR again, and when they asked a bunch of people, I can't remember how many it was now at this point, but it was one of these surveys, a grand survey, a question about meetings. And the question was, when you have a contribution to make in a meeting, how often are you able to do so? And only 35% said that they felt able to make a contribution all the time. And at this stage of my life, I'm a little bit more E than I. I'm a little bit more extrovert than introvert. So I tend to make my contributions, but I also recognize there are a lot of people sitting around the room that I'm sure have good ideas, and they just don't come out with it during that time. So we should look out for them. Who else should we look out for? We should look out for remote members, especially for hybrid meetings. I think there's a lot of value to in-person meetings, I really think, but some people, just need to join by Zoom, and maybe that's their permanent situation, or maybe it's just that day. We should look out for them too. But then I think the other thing is we should look out for women and other members where there may be a power dynamic at play, and really think about how to invite them into the conversation, especially if you're in a leadership role. Your job is also to develop other people, make sure that the group really reflects a place where they also can be happy and feel like they're fulfilled at work, as best as they can be. So what about extroverts? So what do we mean? These are people that we say it's more about where you gain energy from, they're tending to gain energy from the outside world. Introverts will say, you tend to gain energy from time in their inner world. I certainly am both during some situations, but these days find that the E is coming out more. And when we're thinking about it in the meeting context, your extroverts tend to be the ones like me. You're thinking, editing, and talking all at the same time. Whereas introverts may be thinking and editing, and then they'll say something. And so, and I think that's really valuable because they often have a lot of really valuable contributions to make to meetings, like ideas, things you wouldn't have thought about. And so just try to identify who are the people that talk more than listen, and who listen more than talk. And you can also tell by people who have a quick responsive speech, can't wait to get in, and they're interrupting other people or finishing other people's sentences. And maybe an introvert might tend to pause, maybe then respond. And they tend not to be your interrupters or your people that try to finish other people's sentences. And then there's that other dimension, the whole judgers and perceivers. And, judgers, what does that mean? Well, on the Myers-Briggs, the framework is tend to be structured, tend to prefer to have things decided, and perceivers tend to be a little bit more spontaneous. They like to leave their options open. Again, here too, this is where I feel like I can be both. It just depends on the situation. But there are definitely times where I'm more of a J. I push for closure. I want decisions. Let's just get this over with. And then perceivers might, well, can we maybe just think about that a little bit more? Maybe I'm not sure if I want to do that. Yet I'm not sure if I want to do the other thing. Let's just think about it some more. And that can be tough if on your meeting agenda, you were hoping to have a decision by the end of the day. Judges will tend to be really quick to either show their agreement or show their disagreement. And perceivers, it might be those people who are hard to read, the ones like, oh, I'm not really sure, but not saying no. I don't feel really that strongly about it. They may say things like this. And then on top of that, judges might be very time conscious, very planful. You and I are probably
Mm,
talking about the same things in terms of our activities with respect to meeting planning, whereas perceivers might be casual with time and plans. That's not to say that they're still not organized and still
right.
can't plan, but they may just have a different sort of perspective. So we just have to think about how can we all get along. And regarding those introverts, I think there's some nuances here because I think you want to maybe call some people in, but you also have to worry about making sure that you're not accidentally putting them on the spot in a way. So you really have to kind of know that person a little bit. And that's
Mhm.
hard when people join new organizations and only have ever met by Zoom. You don't really get to know that person and what their style is. But you could establish ground rules for participation. Maybe it feels a little informal, but maybe like, say at the beginning, we just want to recall we're here on Zoom, especially, or even in person if you feel this is helpful for your group. Just want to remind folks, let's try not to talk over people who are already speaking. I was recently in a hybrid meeting and bunch of people who are inserting their ideas in the room. And as I
Oh,
raised
you
my
forgot
hand,
about
and
it.
I was actually in there, I raised my hand and said, with three voices talking, the people on Zoom cannot tell what the heck we are talking about. So can we please go one at a time? And that worked. And it wasn't mean. It wasn't, nobody responded badly to it. It was like, oh yeah, good point. It's just people get excited and they forget.
Yeah.
Um, and then also, I think, if someone actually takes credit for someone else's idea, or you might want to be that person and says, that's a great point. I'm glad that you're reinforcing Shelley's idea on that. And I think we should really, think about how to take that forward.
Mhm.
And this is another opportunity to help kind of balance the engagement within
Mhm.
the meeting.
I love all this commentary, and I'm kind of going to your before, before, during, and after the meeting. I think it's really interesting or important for me in terms of the trying to recognize the different personality preferences is to do in the before stage. If I know that I'm going to have introverts because I'm an off the chart extrovert, it's even more important then before the meeting to send the agenda, pick up the phone or an email. Hey, Kim, at next Thursday's meeting, I wanted to make sure, that this agenda looked cool to you. And I would love it if you could weigh in on item number 4. I know you had a great idea about such and such. Would it be okay if, you prepare a couple comments or maybe do a slide? So you give that person time to process
Yes,
because they need to think, prepare, and that way, like you said, Ludy, you're not kind of like, hey, Kim, you had a great idea about that. What was that? And they're kind of taken aback. So I think the pre-meeting meetings, and again, it's kind of the eye roll of like, are you kidding me? I have to do even more work. Yeah, sometimes they're pre-meeting meetings to gain consensus and what's the strategy going to be and what's the goal of this and making sure everybody's prepared one-on-one little pre-meetings, and then you get to the meeting, and then there's a whole post-meeting thing too. So you're going to get to that soon. But I think it's a really important what you said earlier about the pre-meeting. What before happens in meeting is so important to set the stage, to make the actual meeting during a meeting one that where everyone feels heard. And like you said, that's a great tip of the ground rules. We're going to go one by one. I want to make sure we hear from everyone, or please, if you don't feel like you're being heard, I'll give space in the meeting for how are we missing anything? Have we forgotten anything? Have we not heard from someone? So, and you set that culture, you set that expectation where then people don't feel shy to speak up or don't feel like intimidated. So it's all about, as a good leader, setting a good culture and making sure people realize this is how we roll around here. This is how we do meetings.
that's right. Yeah, absolutely. And I totally 100%. That agenda is so helpful for our introverts or people who just need more time to think about what they're going to say. And that's great because then you're giving them the opportunity so to participate. Totally. So this kind of gets into the after, but the other reason an agenda is helpful is you can have follow-up on those action items, and it can be really brief minutes. And I don't want to spend a whole lot of time writing, people worry that you do what I'm suggesting or you and I are talking about here, that this just takes more time. I just think it makes, in the long run, your time spent more efficiently. And so having an agenda now helps you simply convert it into a, hey, here's just some follow-up note. You can be casual about it. Or if you think some formality is required and your institution or organization really records their minutes and you keep it on a shared drive, it can be really useful for that too, because often you'll go back and say, what meeting did we talk about? Didn't we make a decision on that? Wow, now you have a record of what you all said. So I think, having a debrief at the end and then followed by meetings after, minutes after could be useful.
Mm.
What do I mean by a debrief?
Mm-hmm.
Let's get some immediate feedback. There's this plus delta framework. And again, there's some articles about this that I link to here. What does that mean? Plus is some brief comments at the end about what worked well in this meeting and what could be, better next time. I have some examples here for a generic meeting, like, hey, I thought this was great. There are a lot of people attended. We had great discussion today. We didn't have any tech problems. But one thing I was hoping for was that I really didn't feel like we had clear action items on the end. And I also felt like we ran out of time. We didn't get to the end of it. And it can be said just like that, very casually. And I think people go, yeah, and people, if you're feeling it and thinking it, chances are someone else is feeling the same way. We had a journal club yesterday, and this is where our fellow presents a study or a paper. We all read it in advance. We come together and have a discussion. And it could even be something like that. At the end of it, she said, hey guys, this was our first hybrid in person and Zoom. I thought it worked so well. We had a great discussion. Sorry for the tech problems. I know that we'll work on that next time, but next time could we, continue this? And it was just as casual as that. But actually, when I thought about it, that was a plus delta right there.
Mm.
And everybody responded really positively and said, yeah, you're right. Let's continue to do it this way. This was a really effective journal club.
Especially if you could get someone to be authentic in that, because I'm thinking my mindset would be, or I'm accustomed to, hey, how was that? How was my talk? Or how was it meeting? It was good. It was great. No, tell me one thing that we could do better. Tell me one thing that I could do better in that talk. Can you think of one thing versus how did it go? Because it's almost like saying, how are you? Fine. Everybody wants, they know the answer you want to hear is good, fine, great, wonderful. No, tell me one thing. So if you said, I like that example you gave of, again, as a leader, setting the culture, the expectation. No, we don't do kind of superficial, everything sunshine and lollipops, be real. Yeah, it was good. And there are opportunities for improvement. And it was good. And I would have liked, so that setting that, have somebody, again, that would probably be a pre-meeting meeting. Hey, Kim, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to do my debrief. Will you please set the tone by, being authentic and setting a good, a pro and a con and a plus and a minus. And so that way other people say, oh, they actually do want to hear real feedback and not just like, oh, this is great. You're perfect. This is wonderful, which doesn't feel so, false.
Yeah, right, exactly. Right. And throughout this, I try to, because I realize the culture in academic medicine is just different. And so we not expect, although I think, frankly, some places do feel like, bigger companies and so on and so forth. And there's a place and a time for those kinds of meetings that are very formal and very rigid. But most of us, I think, kind of exist on a continuum, and we recognize that the authentic human relationships. We're in the business of healthcare and medicine. We definitely realize there's a place for really having something naturally evolve organically to then a style that fits and works for your team and your group. So yeah, that's basically it. The last item I want to say about the meeting follow-up is, yeah, maybe some notes would be helpful to send out, even if it's an email. If you want to put it on that same Word document, that way you have a file that's attached to it. If it's only on email, you'll have to go searching your email inbox for it later.
Right.
And then I think if you're the meeting organizer, let's say it's a recurring meeting and it's recognized that you're the organizer, if you have called out people for the action items, which, hopefully during the meeting, they've agreed that they'll take that on, then you check in with them. Hey, I noticed that, you were going to do this for this upcoming meeting. Now we're a few weeks into the future. Just wanted to check on that. Are you ready for that? And maybe that's a time when you realize if you have some team members that struggle to deliver on things that they say they would do, this is something that you're doing as a favor to really help them deliver on the things that they said they would.
Yeah.
And then also it gives you, and this doesn't, we've been joking about the meeting before the meeting, but sometimes, if you're know each other well and they know they're accountable for it, that's a quick email. And that's
Yeah.
just, hey, just wanted to check in on this. So,
Exactly.
any case, that's really it. I'm really optimistic. I think they can help us get our work done. I also think that people want human connection in the workplace, and we can do that through many means, but I think having effective meetings where people feel like they're engaged and getting some use out of them and feeling like they're making progress gives people a sense of empowerment and agency too. So I have these articles that are linked in the slide deck. So if anybody wants them, I'm happy to give them to you, Kim, so you can post them.
We're totally going to put all your materials on the facultyfactory.org website. I did have 3 or 4 things I wanted to follow up with, but before I forget, I want to give folks your email address, lshih@bidmc.harvard.edu. I'll repeat that, LSHIH stands for Ludy Shih @bidmc.harvard.edu. Again, this will be on the facultyfactory.org website. But I was thinking when you were talking about the follow-up notes, I have this these 2 advisory boards that I mentioned, and they only meet quarterly. And so I try to do really succinct minutes. And what I started doing, because this is the way my brain works, is somebody once made a comment, nobody reads meeting minutes. And then I'm like, well, they're right. Probably nobody really reads these as a separate attachment, separate email. So I piggyback all the minutes and agendas in one email. So that it ends up being a long email, but I will open up the email I sent. So in September for the first meeting, and I write the new notes and attach the new agenda to the December email, so that by the end of the academic year, they have one email that's got all the minutes from all the meetings and the relevant attachments, but it's then in one document. So they're not searching for, as you said earlier, like what is a meeting where. It's kind of all in one big email. So that could be, I'm not sure if anybody even reads that, but to me, it was my solution to looking for which quarterly meeting did we decide what, or where are all those emails with all the meeting minutes, even though I have a file folder for the advisory groups, but I have it's in one document that I can scroll down really quickly to see who was there, what we did. The second thing I was going to say is I've heard that AI now, it will record your meeting and put your meeting minutes together for you. Gosh, that's unbelievable. But the big ask I had of you was types of meetings and formats of meetings. Can I give you an example and maybe you could help me figure this out? I've been asked to lead a policy revision of a formal document. And I tend to work best when I'm writing alone. And I guess there are people who do group writing. It's not me, meaning like, let's all write a paper together in one room. It's ended up that this meeting, there are about 9 of us on a Zoom call, and I have the document in front of us, and people are, as we're scrolling through it line by line, talking what this should say. Kim, this should say la, 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 la. Some people are putting comments in the chat about what should the document be. Some people are on the Google Docs version, and as I'm reading it, they're changing it in real time. Other people are texting me what should happen about this document, and somebody else is sending me an email. I feel so, I've never in my life felt so incompetent. I'm like, I've made it pretty far in life. I'm pretty productive. I feel like this is the worst kind of format. And it's really made me think about the types of meetings and how they happen, where they happen. And I'm like, whatever's going on, this is the wrong way to edit a document with people all using these different ways of. I felt like I'm in like, and people are shouting at my head. And I just saw, you know what I did? And I feel like so old school, but I said, I've taken the document off of a Google Docs that had 52,000 bubbles and comments, and I couldn't even, it was like spaghetti. I stripped it, made sure all the and I said, I'm doing this old school. I'm like giving you the Word document of this version in the email. Ludy, please do this. Kim, please do that. I mean, I itemized it and said, would you please then send your replies back to me? And then when we get together, we'll look at the thing after. So you're making me think of the different styles or types or purposes of maybe this
Yeah.
is like it's a
Yeah.
wrong I picked the wrong way, the wrong platform. Can you give any insight into like purposes of meetings and how you do it and when you know it's wrong?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think I'm not going to have the answer either, but one thing that sort of struck me was what was the thing that needed to be done, and editing a document is interesting in companies. So I will say from the clinical trial perspective and designing a clinical trial protocol, that's the place where everyone goes in and puts all their comments and so on and so forth. So it made me think of that, and that there was a thing that was sent out well in advance. People put their edits and comments in. They kind of did what you did, except for, maybe there's a software platform or there's like a OneDrive where they then went through them. And then the meeting was had when there were things that like, okay, you said this, Jim, but Tina said this, and we need this item. So I resolved all these other things, but this is the one that we need discussion on. So I've seen it done that way, and that can work well for a complex, legal document even that needs to go through sort of stringent oversight with lots of little details in it. It's
Yeah.
reminding me of a policy document that you might be revising. But I thought you handled that well. I mean, I think that's just another way to deal with it. And you're highlighting that in this day and age, we just have so much information coming at us in so many different ways, and what a challenge to navigate.
Yeah, and everybody, I like how you emphasized running meetings that work for you. And so you think, who is the you in that thing? The you is me, but then it's also meetings that work for that everybody else. And that is it's a skill. So we kind of shrug meetings off as like, nah. But boy, when you go to a good meeting and you just kind of, and this is my high J speaking, when you just power through stuff and you leave going, yeah, we are just such a great team and we accomplished so much and this is great and you feel energized versus leaving a meeting going, what the heck just happened? That was the biggest waste of my life. Why are we still talking about this month after month, year after year? I
Yep.
want to pull my hair out. So
Yep.
there's so many different ways of meeting. And just this recent experience with that project I'm doing has really made me rethink of like, I mean, kind of from the very beginning, I knew I'm like, this is not going to work for me because I know the way
Yep.
I work. I can't work when I'm saying right, work and think when people are in my ear. And that's how I kind of felt like everything was blown. I'm running the meeting and watching the chat and the online real time and the emails and the texting and the people talking. And I was like, oh no, this is not going to work for me. Other people, they'd be like, yeah, this is great. But for me, I was like, oh no, no. My brain just kind of went, yeah, done. Checking out, my brain tapped out, note later. So it's really made me think about the meeting coming up tomorrow, actually, how I've been doing a lot more pre-work. And my intention is to be a lot more like, okay, what are the three things we've not yet resolved? Let's just discuss those. We're not going to go line by line through this 40-page document. So I'm hoping it's going to be a lot more calm and controlled, and I won't be freaking out, but
Well,
really
good luck.
makes
It sounds like
yeah.
it sounds like you're headed in the right direction. So that's great.
Oh, this is great. I love the idea of the before, the during, and the after. This has been some really great advice. And I hope you like this, Dr. Wilsey, and everybody else listening. This is Dr. Ludy Shih. You can get in touch with her. Go to our website, look at her materials. She's going to share her slide deck with us, and you get in touch with her and learn more from her anytime. But thanks so much for being on the Faculty Factory podcast, Ludy. Please come back and give us some more advice. We love hearing and learning from you.
Thank you, Kim. Thanks for the invitation again.
Hello there, Faculty Factory podcast listeners. It's your podcast producer, Casey Callanan. Just wanted to let you know that as of May 1st, 2024, this podcast has had more than 93,000 total downloads and YouTube views from listeners in 98 different countries. And the Faculty Factory website, facultyfactory.org, has drawn nearly 45,000 web visits from users in 122 different countries. This is an international platform, and we want to invite you to be a guest on our show. So we just want to hear from different faculty around the world, and this is our play to you. Please reach out if you'd like to be a guest or to nominate someone in our academic medicine community that you think we need to hear from. Visit the Contact Us page on facultyfactory.org to send us a message, or contact Dr. Skorupski directly at kskorupski@jhmi.edu.
Thanks for tuning in to Faculty Factory Podcast. The mission of the Faculty Factory is to build and support a community of leaders in faculty development who share tools, resources, wisdom, and encouragement in service to our faculty members, schools, and institutions. We encourage you to go to facultyfactory.org to find out more, get in touch with me, ask me any questions. Maybe you want to be interviewed on the podcast. Thanks for tuning in to Faculty Factory Podcast. We'll see you next time. The Faculty Factory podcast and website is sponsored by the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine Office of Faculty. For more information, visit facultyfactory.org.